Hello, everyone. We're back. We are sticking to our monthly schedule here. We're 2 months in, and we're absolutely crushing it, aren't we, Steve?
Absolutely crushing it.
Yeah, we're doing better with this than we are doing with anything else. Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We've just spent about an hour catching up, the two of us, and kind of regretfully talking about how we've struggled to get much in this year, which leads us on to our first check-in of 2025 with Matt and
Mm.
Steve's TTRPG Accountabilityometer 2025, because we are going to be racing through this list. Steve, how many of these have you managed to play since we last spoke?
I played all of yours and all of mine,
And all of last
and
year's.
all of last year's and all of next year's too.
All
Uh,
games that aren't out yet.
I've played zero.
Oh,
I was really hoping the gaming weekend that I went on was a lot of fun, but we had some illness and stuff like that that kind of disrupted the weekend a little bit, and so I was not able to bring Eat the Reich or Stars Without Number to the table with that group, but it's still on my list to get it done.
well,
But you,
shame on you, Steve.
yep,
That's appalling.
yep.
I have read the new version of Legend in the Mist, which dropped the playtest that kind of, well, the kind of semi-complete playtest that came through. That's really interesting, and I'm kind of, but I haven't played it. I've looked at some of the other books and not played them.
Does
But this week just gone, I arranged for a group to get together to play Teeth, and that was really exciting. We didn't play Teeth because we played Blades 68.
oh,
The subject of this video. We were all ready for a double tap of Teeth, ready to play 2 sessions, whole table ready and psyched for it. But then they announced that there would be an open playtest for the 60s themed reskin new version of Blades in the Dark, and like a very easily distracted toddler and someone dangling some keys off to the side, I was just like, gimme that. And I said to everyone, hey, I know we're down to play Teeth, but does anyone want to play Blade 68? And everyone just said yes. So that's what we did. I now have my Teeth group has been supplanted by the Blade 68 group, and I wanted to talk about it. I was hoping that we'd both get a chance to have a play with it before we recorded, but as of right now, I've played 1 session, and you've had a good read, like
mhm.
of the document. It is a work in progress. There's a lot of things you can tell will be fine tuned and changed. But yeah, we wanted to talk about this version of the game because I think it's super interesting to kind of fill people in on the background of Blade 68. The 68 in the title refers to the year 968, which is about 400 years or so after the events of the first Blades in the Dark. But it makes it kind of analogous to the 1960s that we know. So we've got people on mopeds wearing miniskirts and having beehive haircuts and
It
being kind of 60s style gangsters, which is very cool.
yeah, I think it's only like 120
Is it?
years. Yeah, yeah.
Ah,
I
okay.
think it's like 845 or something like that in the original Blades. But
Ah, okay.
yeah,
There
but
is a timeline in the book, but I clearly have not read it.
I think it is interesting because Blades in the Dark, the original, has that very Victorian-esque feel,
Mm.
and so from that perspective, it's in our world, there's about 120 years between that and the 1960s.
Yeah.
So I think it is fun how they have introduced those changes to the world.
Yeah, and the cover art. There's not much art in this book, but the cover art very evocatively shows yeah, a very subtle nod to Mad Men and falling through the air from a skyscraper, shooting his gun upwards. Duskvo has changed. The town of Duskvo is now no longer surrounded by ghosts and lightning pillars. There is now a kind of giant TV screen over Duskvo projecting psychedelic scenes and also blue skies and sunlight, which gives the whole thing a lighter feel. But then as soon as that, it's called blue time, the kind of artificial blue sky. But when that finishes, then the ghosts come out again, and it becomes very much like the Dustfall that we kind of know and love, but with better clothes and slightly improved food, I would have thought. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about my experiences running the playtest, first of all, and also just running Blades, because the interesting thing about the table that I got together for this is we were so inexperienced with Blades. There was 4 players and me. And between us, I think I counted, we had less than a dozen games of Blades in the Dark, full stop. And 10 of those were for one person. So I think there was a couple of us who'd only played once. And, you know, the one time I've played was under your stewardship, which, you know, I really enjoyed that game. Talked about this on BlueSky. The most memorable thing that happened was our friend of the show, Tavon Gatling, detonating a pony in a mine shaft. And I'm maybe you can help clear this up, Steve, because I seem to remember that he did that to cause some kind of distraction, but I don't think we needed one. I think it was just a thing that happened, and I can't, and it did cause a distraction, and it was certainly a good, and it was a very memorable thing that happened. But I still can't connect why it did.
So here's the thing, and you know this, anytime you're playing a tabletop role-playing game, but maybe especially when you're playing Blades in the Dark, the players come up with the most challenging, the most ridiculous ways of handling a situation. And as the game master, it's really your role to just get out of the way and let them just blow up a pony in the middle of a mine. Because, you know, who am I to stop that brilliance from happening? I don't remember there being a need for it.
There definitely wasn't. It did happen, and there was no need for it. But who knows what was going on there? But anyway, the Blades in the Blade 68 playtest, very inexperienced table. And I had that thing where I was like, yeah, I can run this. And then I actually started reading. I dug out my copy of Blades in the Dark, had a read through it. And do you know when like something so ubiquitous, like Blades in the Dark is like one of the most popular role-playing games in the world, I was just like in my head, yeah, I know how to play this. And then I read the rules and I was like, I do not know how to play this game. I do not know how to run this at all. And I kept in my head, even though I'd played it with you, in my head, I'd remembered there being moves, and I'd remembered there being a lot more specifics to it rather than. But then I think having played the Wild Sea last year, which is Blades adjacent in how it works, that kind of put me a little bit in that mindset. But it was a bit of a challenge to run, because I really wanted to do it by the book, because this is a playtest after all, and you know they're not going to get any good information out of a playtest where the person running the game is just hand waving everything. But yeah, I found it challenging to run because there's that different rhythm of play, isn't there? Like those, and I had this little bit in Trophy Dark where every time someone does something, you stop and you line up the stakes and the position and everything, and the effect. I was kind of tempted to go with the deep cuts version of the threat roll, but ultimately I was like, let's just do this the old school way first and try and figure it out. But yeah, did you have a similar experience the first time you ran it? Because obviously it's very different to calling for rolls, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it is something that I ran a couple of Blades games that we played for 3, 4, 5 sessions, and then it kind of petered out. Did that a couple of times, and then actually the version that I played the most was Scum and Villainy, which is the sci-fi hack. which is very similar, with just a couple of differences. And we played that for a long time, and I feel like it took all of that gameplay and then also listening to some actual plays of other people running Blades before it really clicked for me.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's because it is so different than traditional role-playing games. And I would say when I started running Blades, I didn't have uh, nearly as much experience with indie games
Mm.
as I do now.
Yeah.
So I had played a lot of D&D, and I was aware of kind of indie games and had played some indie games, but like I didn't have really any experience with Powered by the Apocalypse games,
Mm.
which I feel like is the step from, you go from traditional games to that, from that to Forged in the Dark games, and then to Ironsworn, which is the greatest game of all time.
Yep, correct.
Um,
We're
but it,
contractually obliged to say that, aren't we?
yes, we are. But I feel like it was challenging not calling for roles, and I definitely caught myself a lot of times. And I think part of it is that I like the idea behind that,
Mm.
but also in practice, I have found very few tables are proactive enough to kind of grok that quickly. And what oftentimes happens is I go, okay, well, what action are you rolling? And it's a lot of like, well, I don't know. What do you think it would be? And what do you think it would be? And
You t-
meanwhile,
you tell
I'm
me.
sitting, yeah, I'm sitting there going, well, it's pretty obvious to me what it is, but I'm not supposed to say anything.
Mm.
And then it slows down the pace of the game when it is just that dithering over what to actually roll.
Mm.
So I feel like I've started doing more of a hybrid, which is where I'll be like, well, it sounds like hunt to me. So you can roll that, and this will be the position and the effect. You can roll anything else that you want, just explain it to me, but it's going to change the like position and the effect, which I think is basically within the spirit of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
rules, of like, because it says, hey, they can roll anything they want, but also you can set the position and the effect such that, like, oh, you want to roll wreck in order to sneak into this bar. Okay, well, your position is desperate and your effect is 0.
Yeah.
Because that's not a good way of doing that. So I feel like there's a middle ground, and I think that was one of the things that took me the longest to figure out. And then the other thing that I struggled with was playing the Scum and Villainy campaign. I kept running into my characters were trying to, like, they'd be like, oh, well, we'll just upgrade our ship. And I'm like, well, you can't really upgrade your ship until you've gained enough XP with your crew, and then you spend that XP. And they're like, but we just stole this laser cannon from a shipyard,
Mm.
and we have that now. Like, why can't we just attach that to our ship? And that was a failing on my part, where I should have just been like, you know what, you're absolutely right. Like, here, it's going to be a long-term project. We'll say it's 4 slices of the pie. Once you fill that, then it's all hooked up, and you can just mark that upgrade, because honestly, it really doesn't matter that much.
Mm.
And I was too rigid with the rules in that instance, where I was just like, nope, you have to get 10 XP or whatever on the crew, and then you have to spend that on upgrading your weapons system. And I should have just been like, you know what, long-term project. It is the answer for all things.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting thing to think about is that, like, you guys, if you want to, yeah, you can do that, fine. That's going to be 12 slices of pie, and that's gonna
Yeah.
it's gonna take you all year. And the thing is that then gives people a purpose and something to do
Mhm.
with their downtime, in addition to kind of trying to get the fuzz off their back. Anyway, let's talk about the changes that
Mhm.
have been put into Blade 68. The vast majority of it is setting based. Duskfall has
Mhm.
moved on, and we're in a kind of an expanded and different feeling Duskfall. But mechanically, there's a few clear changes. There's changes to the resistance roll. Now it's possible to resist consequences multiple times. Did this come up in my game? No. Did everyone accept the consequences of everything that happened to them? Yes. And did anyone suffer any physical harm at any point? No. Every time someone made a roll, if it was if the stakes were sufficiently high enough that they would take damage, they aced the roll pretty much. And whenever there was a consequence, because all my consequences were kind of narrative,
Mhm.
people just accepted them.
Yeah.
So that didn't come up, but I'm sure it will. I will try and inflict harm on as many of my
Mm.
players as possible.
It's your responsibility
It
as
is,
game
yeah.
master to really,
Turn the screw.
as much as possible, just turn the screws.
The XP triggers are slightly different. In addition to getting XP for rolling desperate actions, you get an XP for rolling 0 dot actions. So the amount that you collect XP in Blade 68 is kind of increased.
Mhm.
Also we have a different gameplay cycle. We have, they are recognizable from Blades. They have different names, but they are kind of slightly different. We have crew business. Then we have, which kind of has you starting with pitching what the score is, then doing the score. Then we have something called the Trouble Engine, which is what is Blade 68's version of entanglements. And then we have personal business, which is downtime and free play. And that's kind of the structure. So that differs from Blades in the Dark, which is in slightly different order. Is that right?
Yeah, so I mean, it basically goes score, and then you do the entanglements right after the score. So that's the same, but the trouble engine seems to be a little bit more of an expanded version of that, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And then you go in immediately into downtime, and then there's free play, where the personal business kind of mingles free play with downtime. And honestly, I think that's an awesome evolution, because I think that is basically how most people play.
Mm-hmm.
Um and like, this is, and I'll be interested to hear what your experience was at the table, but kind of going back to that conversation about starting to play Blades in the Dark, it feels very much segmented and regimented, where you're like, all right, well, now we're in the score,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're in downtime, and now we're in free play. And I think that is something that new players struggle with a lot, is that it feels very restrictive when they're used to just being able to, like, oh, we just travel around the town, and we visit the tavern, and we talk to people, and this, that, and the other thing. And so I think part of running Blades well is finding that balance between kind of letting people free play,
Mm.
and then also getting that buy-in from your players, that it's like, okay, and this is something that I part of one of the reasons why I play a lot of solo games, is because I get frustrated at times when my players seem to have no interest in learning the system.
Mm.
And it's like, well, if you understand the system, then you're going to have a better experience playing it, because you're not going to feel that friction of trying to do stuff that doesn't really work with the system.
Mm.
And you kind of like, you need to accept the system, and entertain the system's various tendencies, and then it actually works pretty well. And so trying to find that balance between working with the systems, but also, and this kind of goes back to my example about the upgrades to their ship,
Mm.
also just kind of being like, you know what, this is our game at our table. If we want to skip over downtime and, you know, do an abbreviated downtime, or, you know, we do free play for 2 hours and then we go, okay, of that free play, which are the things that mark off those actions within downtime, and we can retroactively roll and all that stuff. I think it's just it's really, that's a big part of learning Blades in the Dark and Blades in the Dark style games,
Mm.
is the systems and the way to approach them. So I really like this evolution because I feel like they've brought more clarity to the systems, where it's almost like in the Trouble Engine section of it, they've intensified the system, they've expanded the system a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but it also feels like it covers more stuff and is a little bit easier to be like, all right, we're going to make this roll and then we're going to free play for a little while and then we're going to come back into, you know, doing a downtime action and then we're going to free play for a little while. So I like this evolution.
Yeah, and the Trouble Engine, to be clear, is not, it doesn't involve the players. It's something that the GM just does off to the side, and it's really just a couple of rolls on a couple of tables based on how much heat the crew has managed to gather, which in my case with my table was a lot of heat. So yeah, we'll come back to Trouble Engine because it's really interesting, and I'll kind of talk about what I've done with it. But one of the other big changes in this game is the keys and deadlocks, which have been added. So you have up to 4 keys as a character in this game, and a key is essentially a character trait. And the example they give in the rulebook is charming, and you are supposed to tick off one of the 3 boxes next to each of your keys every time you RP or like play into that at the table. So if you're charming at the table, or you do something that involves you, you know, relying on your charisma or something, possibly, you could just tell the table, I'm marking a key. You only get to do it once per session, and you only get to do it up to 3 times. When you do it 3 times, and each time you do it, you mark XP on any track as well, which again is speeding up this XP gathering. Once you do it 3 times, you still can hit it for XP, but you can't mark any more of these 3 boxes off. And when you've got 3-4 boxes, so after at least 3 sessions of having this in play, you can do something called turning the key, which is you clear that key, that thing about you, and you deadlock it. When you deadlock something, that means that the other thing, the opposite of that key, becomes true about you. So if you were charming, you will be, you know, miserable or like, you know, sullen or something, and you can no longer hit it for XP, and you can no longer use it. But the thing that it does when you turn the key on purpose is it clears all of your stress, and it does an automatic crit. So if you've got 3 ticks on your keys and you are burning through stress on a score, and you really want to build up to a huge moment, you can sacrifice an element of your personality and, you know, role play it to basically, you know, pull off some amazing feat of daring do. But also you deadlock a key when you hit your stress level. So this kind of replaces the trauma, I guess, from Blades in the Dark. So, you know, you can, you know, max out on stress and end up deadlocking your key that way. So it's sort of a resource, and it's sort of a role playing kind of handicap, I guess. It kind of like puts you where you can no longer use that aspect of your character, and you've got 4 of them, and when you've deadlocked all 4, you're done. You retire. That's the end of your criminal's life. I think I've explained that keys and deadlocks thing correctly, but the reason that I don't know it that well is because we only arranged 2 sessions for this playtest, which means that everyone wrote it down and then said, what did it do? And I told them, and they were like, we're only playing 2 sessions, so is there any point in doing this? So everyone instantly forgot they had them. Good news, everyone. My table has now agreed to 2 extra sessions. We've managed to find some time, so we're now up to 4. So hopefully we'll be able to see some of these keys and deadlocks come into play.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really cool way of doing it. I'd be really interested to see the challenge of like how the characters who've been relying on one aspect of their personality suddenly have to then not be able to do that, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think I like again, I'm going to say this a lot. I really like this evolution from the trauma side of things too, because you've got these very like they're printed on the character sheet. So when you get a trauma, you have to pick one of these keywords. Whereas with this system, suddenly your trauma is the opposite of whatever character trait you're picking to deadlock. And that makes it really interesting because it's like, oh, you've been really charming this whole time, but that's the one you've chosen to deadlock. So what what happened to turn you from someone who's charming to just an utter asshole? And it's like that's super interesting because it could be anything. It could be the other one they've got here in the book is fearless. And so suddenly you're no longer fearless, you're the opposite of whatever that is. And I think it's a really interesting way to show character evolution within a campaign.
Yeah, and the good thing about it coming or stemming from a big character moment where you turn the tide against all odds, even though you are almost completely burnt out on stress, you manage to power through and do it, is that those are the kind of things in game that change a person. Those are the kind of dramatic moments that change a person. So yeah, I think that's super interesting. The way that scores work in this game is I'll talk you through how it works, and you can tell me kind of if it's that different to Blaze in the Dark. So at the start of a score, everyone pitches they pitch something. It's either a client, a target, one of the claims on your claim map, or something else, and that's really it. And then you just choose one. Is that how it works in Blaze in the Dark?
It's how it can work.
Okay.
I think it's more specifically in Blades. You're supposed to like the characters are supposed to pitch what they want to do, but I don't know that it's kind of formalized in the same way that it seems like it is in 68. But also I think it feels very much like you're trying by kind of making that addition, making that change in 68, you're trying to encourage play towards where your original intention was. So I feel like the original intention behind it, and most of the time when I have run Blades, I will introduce them with a score in the first session, and then from there the scores basically just kind of lead on from each other as complications occur. And the characters are like, oh, I'm really interested in learning more about this person, or I want to, steal this thing that we heard about. So I think it's working how it's meant to in the original Blades, but maybe just a little bit more codified.
Yeah, it does say in 68 rulebook that like sometimes the next score is obvious because it carries on from whatever you were doing last time. But I didn't actually get to run a score, from the beginning. in this one. And I spoke to you about this before I started, knowing that you were a very experienced Blades player, because I was like, is it too overwhelming to get them to pitch a score knowing not really anything about the setting and what's going on? I've got a bunch of new players, I'm new. Is that going to be too much? And thankfully Blade 68 has you covered, because it has a bunch of things called cold opens, which are essentially scores that you just kind of start in the middle of. And I know that Blades has got that one, isn't it, that kind of one that's set in Crowfoot that kind of starts you off and gets you going.
Yep.
And I didn't want to just tell them what the score was. And then I started to read the scores in the cold opens in Blade 68. And they're really interesting. And I decided to run one called the Alluvium Affair. And for anyone who doesn't want to have the Alluvium Affair spoiled for them, then you can skip to the time code that is on screen now. Because there is, if you want to play it rather than run it, there is a lot of cool stuff in there. The Alluvium Affair hinges on the fact that your players, the characters, just suddenly come to in the middle of the score. They have set off a rift in reality, which that's a big deal in 68. There's a lot of this kind of distortion of reality in Blade 68, and they all come to in a car. One of them is holding a canister of alluvium. One of them is driving towards a location and a handoff, the details of which are slowly disappearing from their memory and also from the paper stitched to the dashboard in front of their very eyes. And you realise as you start the score that no one can remember the first half of it. So the entire score is about figuring out what you've stolen, who you stole it from, and finding someone else to take it off your hands, very quickly before the authorities close in. And you've got 3 factions chasing you immediately. You don't know why. So it's very much that scene in Memento where, he's running and he's like, okay, what am I doing? I'm chasing this guy. No, he's chasing me. And that was a really great way to start, because it really put everyone in the, straight in the action. You can't get any more in media res than dropping your characters into the situation and they have no idea how they got there. And it really taught us what was going on. You set a couple of clocks for the people who are chasing you and how you're going to get away from them. And, you could run this with half the crew in the car and half the crew at the meeting point, or you could do it. I did it with everyone in the car, and all of them desperately trying to figure out what was going on. And they managed to give the slip to the factions who were chasing them. And then they had, a good bit of time trying to figure out who would take this off their hands at short notice. Because we had quite a bit of character creation stuff that people weren't sure of themselves. When we started, we went through a lot of that at the beginning, which meant that we really only had time to finish the score and didn't get to do the Trouble Engine or downtime, so they'll open our next sessions, even though I've done the Trouble Engine kind of between sessions. And the great thing I would say about these cold opens is the sheer amount of material it generates for you just on how your crew decides to navigate the 3 obstacles, which are escape with your life, find out who you stole it from, and find out who you're going to sell it to. They pissed off so many people in that short, and they also got in with a couple of factions by doing by finding someone to sell it to, and selling it to a faction that isn't an underworld faction. It was Duskvo's biggest rock band, the Silver Echoes, who were just kind of pulled from nowhere as someone who would have an interest in alluvium, because it just looked in the book and it said they had a passing interest in that kind of stuff. And we found ourselves in Crowfoot, which had a nightclub, and just from gathering information and speaking to their contacts, they figured out that would be a good way to shift it. And I got to have fun with some 60s style nightclub scenes, and I got to have a blast with the eruption, the distortions of reality, describing them figuring out what was going on when they all came to at the same time. And I had real fun with the sensory stuff of that, and people glitching in and out of existence, and they turned to their right to see someone on a motorbike chasing them, but there was no motorbike, and then the motorbike kind of phased into existence, and the bullets were being fired through the car, but the windows were smashing before the bullets had gone through them, and it was just hopping back. It was really fun to do that.
Nice.
But yeah, I was pleased that we got to the end of that, and I think because no one really hit a key, and no one got hurt or anything, then I think that the downtime for this is going to be really fun, because I think, is it 9 heat you tap out at when you in what it is in Blades 68? They got 6 heat just from
Nice.
one score. Because it was
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that sounds about right.
and I had fun adding heat in as complication. I don't know if that's keeping in with it, but like, when they actually went to do the handoff with this band in this nightclub, I decided it would be really fun if they got heat, and everyone suddenly was looking at this deal, and it was essentially handing off a nuclear bomb at short notice to some like band's manager in the middle of a crowded nightclub. And I was like, yeah, that might draw some heat. Especially one of them is basically Bender from Futurama, and the other one is basically female Austin Powers.
Oh my goodness.
They were the mugs we sent in to do the deal.
Yep.
But yeah, I thought the cold open was a really great way of starting it, and looking at the Trouble engine, and I've rolled on the Trouble engine and generated some stuff. Like, you could just choose, or you could just use your common sense and pick what makes sense. But I found just rolling on it gave me a like, here's a thing, and then some of the complications and some of the trouble that you roll up, they've actually fleshed it out in the Trouble engine. They're like, here are some potential things they do that might happen if the crew ignore this. It's not the rules. That doesn't exactly happen, but here are some things that might happen. Here are some things that might happen if you choose to deal with it this way. And I think that's just a really nice, because it's not player facing, that part of it. It's all GM busy work, essentially. Like, you do it, and now I've just got more to work with. So in that the personal business that's coming up, I'm going to get to see my players interact with their contacts and do some social scenes, do some stuff together, see them exploring their vices. But also, I've got this thing that I can just kind of fold into the story or not. I might bring it in while the score's happening, because that would be interesting. So yeah, I thought that way of getting you started was really good, because I did find myself whilst thinking about what we were going to do, and I'm like, am I going to have to prep some stuff here? And you know me, Steve, I don't want to prep anything. And it was like, well, you kind of don't really have to, because once you're off and running, the players decide what you're going to do. It's all pushed by them. You just have to be good at thinking on your feet and be able to use the levers that you're given to make their scores fun and interesting, and make the world around them seem dangerous and exciting.
Yeah. My favorite part of running Blades in the Dark is the fact that it really is a no prep or incredibly light prep system. Because exactly like you say, it creates its own complications, and most of my prep when I run Blades is just being like, all right, what happened last session? What are the faction clocks that are in motion right now, and what are like 3 to 5 possible like complications or things that could come up in the session depending on which way they go. And like, I don't need to prep any of that stuff, but like, I just do that for me, so that I have that backstop in case in the moment I'm like, I don't know, I'm blanking on something. Oftentimes I don't even use that stuff, because I get other ideas fueled by the actual play at the table. But it is really, really cool to have the faction system. And I'm right there with you on liking to have liking options, but not being like, okay, well, if they do this, then this is what happens. it's like, you could do these things or you could do something completely different. It's your game.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the fact that when we start next week or week after next, when we're next meeting, like I give everyone like a little bit of homework and say, well, you've got downtime coming up. Just have a think about what you want to do. You've got this much heat. You've got this much stress. Just think about what you want to do. And then we'll just do a score. And the thing is I don't need to think of any complications, because complications are most of the roles in Blades of the Dark and games like this. I've now got, I think, 6 factions listed on my sheet that are like 4 are negative, 2 are positive. There you go. That's enough to work with.
Yeah.
There are so many weird and wonderful factions in this game that can have an interest in what's going on. They're also got a ward boss that they're refusing to pay like straight away, who are a bunch of like psychopaths. So I've got that to play with, and it's just like I'm really interested to see what they're going to come up with as a score, because like they've decided they want to be art thieves. So I'm just like, well, do you want to go and steal some art, or do you want to go and investigate, go and piss off one of these people that you think were chasing you before, or do you want to go and stick it in the eye of the people who are in charge of your district? It's so open. I've got so much material to use, and it's all just the name of a faction and a modifier, basically.
Yeah.
It does a lot of heavy lifting for you. One thing about the cold open, I played the cold open exactly like you would in a TV show. So I started the session, I said, is everyone ready to start playing? And then I went straight into this cold open of this the start of the Illuvium affair. Then cut to black, said Blades in the Dark 68, the Illuvium affair. Then I did something that the book recommends, which is a ritual that it talks about called the opening credits. Basically, I think it's called the opening credits, the opening titles. And the way you do that is you, as the GM, describe a quick shot of as if this was a TV show, and then you throw it over to one of your other players, and they describe a shot of what they're doing, as they would be introduced in the credits of a TV show. Back to you. You talk about something else. It might be foreshadowing something that's going to happen in the episode. It might be talking about something geopolitical that's going on, like outside of the realms of your crew. It might be just some scenes from Duskvo, and you go around the table back and forth. Then you get into the thing. Now, this is my big bit of feedback for the designers of Blade 68. My table fucking loved this. It put everyone in the space straight away, and the thing is the book doesn't commit to making it part of the rules, and that's fine, I guess, because you shouldn't have to do that, right? But the writers say that rituals are important, and lots of people talk about this in tabletop role-playing games because we're all friends who play, right? Or we're all people who know each other. You get together, you catch up, you talk about your days, you talk about your weeks, you talk about your pets, whatever. But then you got to start playing, right? And having a ritual that starts play is such a good, clear delineation between social time and we start playing. And play is social, right? But so many parties and tables I've been at struggle to just take that first step. So why not just formalize this and just say, this is how you start your sessions? Because rituals are really important, and that is a really fucking cool one, and it just puts you straight in the mindset. It makes people think about their characters, it makes the GM think about the world and what's going on, and it's just really low pressure and fun. And I think that I think it should be part of the rules, and if you don't do it in the rules, you should be banned from playing it.
As usual.
Yeah, TPK. If you don't do it. How do you feel about rituals at the start of games, and this one in particular?
I mean, I essentially 100% agree with you. I think they're great, and similarly, I think it's really nice to have a starting point, something to really set the scene, set the mood. And I think I would think we should do it for all games. And now I'm sitting here thinking about the game that I'm running on Monday. Like, what ritual can I start that is it something like this specifically, or is it some variation on it? And I think that's really cool. Something that I'm curious about, because this is where I thought you were going with it. So I think this would be a lot of fun to do, especially with your first session with the cold open, is to do that like introductory, because it looks like there's a little introductory part of narrative that you can read as part of the cold open, and then cut to your title screen, and then you make characters.
Oh, that's cool.
So that you're like, you come into it like that is literally you're like, all right, well, are we ready to start for the evening? Cool. Cold open, just you hit it hard, and then you're like, all right, that's the situation. Now who's everybody playing?
Mm.
And then that way the characters, the players have a little bit more of a sense of the world and kind of the vibe of what they're getting into
Mm-hmm.
before they actually go through the process of creating their characters.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I like that a lot. I think it's the only issue that we would have had is that we never would have got to play, because
Yeah.
everyone would have been, oh, what's good? What's a good build? What do I do here? I mean, I think it's great in. And this is the thing is that we talk about, well, I talk about the Gauntlet games all the time, but this opening sequence is part of Brindlewood Bay. It's because Brindlewood Bay is explicitly a television show, and you start the every session of Brindlewood Bay by doing an opening montage, which is supposed to be the opening credits of the show Brindlewood Bay, and it's very much like this. And I just wondered whether this would. I don't know whether they don't want to lean into the fact of you're playing a TV show, all the time, but then don't call them cold opens. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
and I think about the kind of opening moves for Starforged, where you have something kind of similar, where it's like, all right, like you roll on a table or two and use that as a prompt for a little vignette of something that is going on in the universe, and it doesn't have to be directly related to your character. And I mean, it's the same reason why the Tales from the Drift worked so well,
mhm.
is it provides texture to the universe without actually having any stakes within the main story.
Yeah. But yeah, I really like that idea, and I would definitely feed that back as being something that my players got a massive kick out of, and I'm really looking forward to doing it again. And I know that all the players are thinking about how they're going to have their one shot in the credits as they turn to camera and the character name pops up for the next session. But yeah, ultimately, I had a blast with Blade 68. It says a lot about how much fun it is that. Like I said, my tables agreed to double the length of this little run, and who knows, we might carry on further. But I tell you what, this has given me the kind of motivation to actually run a Blades, old school Blades Duskfall in person, though, with everyone, with a big map printed out of the streets.
Nice.
The big old one you can get off drive through. I'll get that printed out at print services at work. Just huge kind of map, and kind of huddled around, thinking of crimes to commit. But yeah, I had a real fun time with Blade 68. I'm really looking forward to actually running a session. So it won't be this one, because we need to do downtime, then we need to do score, then we need to do downtime again.
Yeah.
But if we can get through that, because we don't have the obligation of having to finish everyone's characters and explain the rules at the start, then hopefully the next session will be a standard one, and the table will be in the groove of like picking scores and getting into the story, and deciding whose nose they want to put out of joint this week, because I guess Blades is just open-ended, isn't it? And like you can kind of play it for as long as you want, and I suppose that the ticking clock on your campaign is, I guess, how powerful your crew becomes. I suppose, like how long do people tend to play get like campaigns of Blades for? Is it until like they take over every claim in their neighborhood, or?
It's a good question. I think it probably varies, depending on the group. I say that mostly because all of my Blades games have lasted about like 5 to 10 sessions, and my Scum and Villainy game lasted maybe 20 sessions, 25 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Tragically cut short by the pandemic, so it might have gone on longer. Yes, indeed. But I think the cool thing about Blades is, you start with the characters, but then really, if you want to have a long game, it's really about the crew.
Mm.
And there's so many ways in which your character can go to prison or get overindulge in your vice and get lost for a couple of weeks. And it's really, really cool how it encourages you to weave in different characters and be like, oh well, the character that I first created is currently blissed out somewhere in an opium den. So now I'm going to play one of the other playbooks. And it's really cool how it kind of gives you the space to bring in different characters. And then, you can swap those characters out depending on how you're feeling. And so I think that gives it a lot more longevity, because if you're just playing, your one character that you've created, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you do kind of have a ticking clock of, if you trauma out, or if you, in Blade 68, if you get the 4 deadlocks on your 4 keys, like that's, your character has to retire.
Yeah.
And I think that then it becomes more about the story of the crew, and what, like, if you want to play a longer term campaign, it's more about the crew. You can play a shorter campaign and just focus on the characters. But yeah, I mean, I could easily see myself playing a campaign of Blades for like a year or two, playing every week, because I think there's that much to it. There's enough kind of grist there that you can start in Duskfall, but you don't have to stay there. Like you can expand out to other areas, and there's a whole world to explore. So yeah, I think it's probably, if I had to guess, I would say like 20 to 30 sessions is probably an ideal length for a Blades campaign, but you could go less, you could go more.
Yeah. I suppose you've got the ticking clock of retirement, haven't you? And that, how much coin you've got, or how many stacks you've got in Blade 68. And if you want to retire, to a park bench under a newspaper, or whether you want a luxury yacht, that's your difference. But anyway, that was our brief little look at Blade 68. I can't wait to play more. We might check in on this later on. But yeah, thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time, won't we, Steve?
We will see you next time.
Yeah. See ya. Bye-bye.
Peace.